Why are the Pacers so much worse without Tyrese Haliburton this season? What can they do better without their star if they're missing him going forward? Plus, why Haliburton's All-NBA case matters this season, and it's time for Standings Watch. It's all coming today on the Locked On Pacers podcast.
You are Locked On Pacers, your daily Indiana Pacers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What up, y'all? Happy Monday. Hope you had a great weekend, and welcome into another edition of the Locked On Pacers podcast, where we, of course, talk about the Indiana Pacers. As always, my name's Tony East. I cover the team for Forbes, and today, much to discuss for the Pacers, and specifically focusing a lot on Tyrese Haliburton, his All-NBA case, and why it matters this season. And I want to really dive into why the Pacers seem and look worse without him this year than even last season, when they didn't have Pascal Siakam for the whole year and had a different team. And at the end, it's time for Standings Watch, really getting into the weeds on the teams around the Pacers in the standings, what's going to be important for them to watch, strength of schedule, all sorts of stuff like that. We'll do that once a week through the end of the season. Let's start with this. A question I was asking myself in Atlanta watching this team play. They look worse without Haliburton this year to me, which is shocking. And I don't think people remember this very well for some reason. The short-term memory seems to be an issue here. Last year, the Pacers weren't good without Tyrese Haliburton. They're obviously better when he plays, but they went 7-6 in games that he didn't play in, right? That was a huge point of progress for their season. If people remember 2 years ago, they were just awful when he did not play, right? And so it made a lot of value per percent. Like they had that game in Miami that Bruce Brown went crazy. Obviously, they got Siakam, and that helped stabilize things in the middle of the season. But like they won a few games pre-Siakam, post-Haliburton injury, because of like they slowed the pace down and got good play out of Andrew Nembhard, and they just found a lot of stuff that worked their way. And they're 0-3 this year, and things look worse. And Haliburton's only missed 3 games, which is great. But what is actually different, right? Why does it feel so much worse to me? Well, the numbers say I'm actually probably not feeling bad enough, because I'm going to specifically nitpick a little bit with sample sizes today, but it will tell the story that I want to very well. So Tyrese Haliburton and the Pacers since the NBA Cup. That is, to me, when Tyrese Haliburton started playing like Tyrese Haliburton, right? He had that game against Philly where he had 32 points and 11 assists. Then he had 21 and 10 against the Pelicans, and the Pacers started rolling, right? That's when they got to their winning ways and saved their season, got back on track, and Haliburton looked good again, right? That was very important for their season. Since that time, with Tyrese Haliburton on the floor, the Pacers are plus 194, just in general. It's quite good. They have a 122.6 offensive rating. That's awesome. That's like one of the best figures for a star player. They have a 114.5 defensive rating for a plus 8.1 net rating. That's great. If you're the Pacers, you're thrilled with those numbers. Tyrese Haliburton's playing great. You're winning when he's out there by a lot. That's like almost an elite team level number, and he's playing over 30 minutes a game. You should be winning all the time. And they are when he plays. When he does not play, when he's not on the floor, not even games he misses, right? When Tyrese Haliburton's off the floor in that same stretch since the Cup, the Pacers are -9 in 660 minutes. That is any lineup that doesn't have Haliburton. Their most used group, for example, in this stretch is Siakam, Bryant, Mathurin, Shepard, McConnell. That has Siakam. Siakam is in most of, in fact, their most used non-Haliburton lineup. So these are still good lineups. They're -9 total across any group of 5. Without him on the floor since the NBA Cup, the Pacers have a 112.7 offensive rating. That's 10 points worse than when Haliburton's on. But their defense gets a little better, 1.6 points. So it goes down to 112.9. That makes sense, right? He is not a good defender. Tyrese Haliburton isn't. However, because the Pacers score so much when he's out there, they can set their defense more, and their defense isn't that much worse without him. Regardless, you can do the math. That's a -0.2 net rating without him. This is not a why. That is just the numbers that say, wow. This is 3 months of a season now, This is like a smaller sample than the full season because they were better with him on the bench early in the year, obviously, right? But since he started playing like himself, the Pacers are about 8.5 points per 100 possessions better with Haliburton on the court than off. And last year, they found ways to win. What is different? Well, let's get a little under the hood with some shooting splits. This season, since the NBA Cup, with Haliburton on the floor, the Pacers are making 38.8% of their threes and 59.4% of their twos. Pretty healthy numbers, both of those. With him on the bench, 33.9% of their threes. Ugh. Can't make them, can't create them. 55.2% of their twos. So they're worse from everywhere. So that's the part that we can see. And it's obvious without doing any numbers research to the stuff I just explained to say, it's going to be harder for them to create shots without Tyrese Haliburton on the floor. Pascal Siakam just ran through this. I talked about it after both Hawks games. They're not as good at getting in the paint, stirring the drink, whatever euphemism you want to use, getting their offense going and creating those shots with him on the bench. But that still doesn't explain this difference because, for example, last season in full, right, when the Pacers offense with Haliburton on the floor was unbelievable, 37.6% of their threes went in. So they're about 1% above that in the last 3 months. But 60.4% of their twos went in. They're actually below that. You could argue that their post-NBA Cup offense with Haliburton on the floor is about what you'd expect percentage-wise in terms of what they can expect going forward, right? That's what we saw for a full season last year. However, last year with Haliburton off the floor, the Pacers still had a 118.8 offensive rating. Their bench was better. I already ran through that on Thursday's show, how much worse the bench has been this year. But the bench was better. Even other groups with a mix and match starter group were better. And last year with Haliburton off, the Pacers made 37.4% of their threes. They found ways to get and make good threes. 57%, 57.2 to be exact, percent of their twos went in. That's where they saw a drop off last year and where they are seeing it again this year. Haliburton makes everyone's life easier from two, and he ups the volume from three. Both of those are obviously significant because the Pacers are a decent shooting team from beyond the arc, but without him, they lose the volume, and then they can't make up the inside the arc percentage. This all points to the same stuff that Siakam said. They have to find ways when Tyrese Haliburton isn't playing to get into the paint. Some of that, I think, is playing through Siakam more as a post player, since he's just naturally in the paint. Some of that is just going to have to be better, more effective work with the ball from Nembhard, from Mathurin, from McConnell, not only creating for themselves, which Mathurin did a great job of without Haliburton the other day, but also for others. They lost McConnell on Saturday. Nembhard has been creating well for others, but not himself of late. He had double-digit assists in both Atlanta games. That is where this starts for me, is they have to play the way that they want to as a team, paint to grain as they call it, regardless of who's on the floor. Their shot quality is going to be worse. That's not an insult to the rest of their talent. Tyrese Haliburton's just really good, right? But they have to find ways to be more efficient. And you can see it in the splits, right? This season, without Haliburton on the floor, right, 59.87% of their shots are either at the rim or from three. It's okay. For reference, last year, again, different roster to start the season, but the last 41 games they had Siakam, so half the year. Last year, 66.75% of their shots with Haliburton off the floor were either at the rim or from three. So last year, when they were worse but still found ways to grind out wins when Haliburton was out, they were better at getting to the rim or generating threes as an offense. They were better at making threes. Their offense was actually capable. And so that defensive growth they got when Haliburton was on the floor was enough for them to win enough. Not be a good team, but win enough. This year, their defense is only a smidge better, but their offense is so much worse without Haliburton. They have got to find a way to shoot from the efficient spots that they love. They've got to make shots. It does not help that the games Haliburton has missed have coincided with slumps from like Nembhard and Toppin and lots of other guys. Obviously, that's the danger of a 3-game sample this season. But still, you can see it. I can run through all the numbers all day. You just watched 2 games where their scoring was up and down, very much dependent on who was on the floor, right? Last year, that was sort of the case, but less so. Last year, they had a better bench in general, even with the same players. They had a different roster for the first 41 games. There's a lot of context required. And I am talking about a small sample. So you can ignore the numbers if you want, but you all watched the games, right? They just looked worse than even last year to me. And so that is something they have to figure out. We'll see about this hip thing and when he actually returns, but they have back-to-back coming up. I think they have 2 this week, right? Like, I don't know this, but is it possible he doesn't play in back-to-backs, right? He can't play both games in Atlanta. So they're going to have to find ways to win without him. And to me, it's about their offensive process, getting some juice in there, playing with tempo, getting into the paint, and creating shots that they deem efficient. However, the team playing quite poorly without him has strengthened, which is silly to say, his All-NBA case. And I mentioned this offhand last week after one of his great games, I can't remember which one, that All-NBA could matter for him in staying with the Pacers long term. Going to explain why coming up here on Locked On Pacers. Before we get to that, though, we need to talk about DoorDash. NBA fans, get ready. They swoosh, you save. Thanks to Dash Pass, every time a player drops 50 or more points in a game, you score a huge deal the next day. It's simple. When any player scores 50 or more in a game during the 2024-25 NBA regular season, Dash Pass members get 50% off an order up to $10 off the next day from noon to midnight. A few ways you can take advantage of this deal. After an epic 50-point game, celebrate by ordering wings, pizza, or burgers from your favorite spot delivered straight to your door. Whether you're staying up, watching highlights, or just need a midnight snack, use Dash Pass to grab something delicious while saving big. Need a quick and easy lunch the next day? With Dash Pass, you get your favorite meals with $0 delivery fees and reduced service fees. Plus, now you save even more. With this exclusive NBA offer, plan to catch the next game, order your go-to snacks, meals at a discount. Get ready for more high-scoring action. Sign up for Dash Pass and be ready to save when any player scores 50 or more in a game like James Harden did last week. Dash Pass members get 50% off an order the next day, up to $10 off. Just use promo code NBA50 from noon to midnight after a 50-point game. On eligible orders at participating merchants must have an active Dash Pass account. Terms apply. Visit DoorDash to learn more. We're back here on Locked On Pacers. Thanks for making us your first listen today and every single day. Make your second listen Locked On Hawks one more time to hear Brad Rowland talk about a 2-game set for the Hawks. That was great. And we'll bring up the Hawks and standings watch because of those 2 games. Although we might not be bringing up the Hawks for much longer. We'll see. Continuing here on the theme of Tyrese Haliburton today. Again, I mentioned this offhand last week. Tyrese Haliburton might end up, if he keeps playing well, or the team keeps not playing well when he's out, get a stronger case for All-NBA. And a lot of guys are missing the 65-game rule, are going to be very close, and that could strengthen his chances, right? So I mentioned last week, if he keeps playing well and he does make All-NBA, this actually could matter for the Pacers' chances of keeping Tyrese Haliburton beyond his current deal. And I want to now explain that, and then you can determine if you think this is something you, as a fan of the team, if you are one, should be cheering for. Now, if I were a fan, I would think this would be a great thing because it's all about his chances of staying with the team. I wrote this the day he signed his contract. This was in my story in Forbes. So here's how the Supermax works in the NBA. Currently, Tyrese Haliburton's deal this season is at 30% of the cap. That's the most he could get. To be eligible to make 35% of the salary cap, you have to, one of 2 things has to happen. The easiest one is you have to be in the league for 10 years. This is Haliburton's 5th season. He's not close to that. The second way is called the Supermax, right? Introduced in the 2017 CBA, has been a highly debated CBA thing. But the way you become eligible for the Supermax is, 1, you're still on the team that you finished your rookie contract with. So Haliburton was not drafted by the Pacers, but he was traded to the Pacers while on his rookie contract. So he checks that box. 2, you meet certain performance criteria, which we'll get to in a second. And 3, you have 7 to 9 years of service. So the Supermax is basically you getting the 35% max earlier, or up to the 35% max. We'll get to that later. So how to become eligible for the Supermax? Well, glad you asked, listener. There's a couple ways. If you are MVP in any of the last 3 seasons, you are eligible for the Supermax, should you, again, have 7 to 9 years of service at some point. The other way is all NBA related or Defensive Player of the Year. If you were Defensive Player of the Year in the most recent season or in 2 of the last 3 seasons, And All NBA is the same rules. If you were All NBA in the most recent season or in 2 of the last 3, you are Supermax eligible. So to be clear, Tyrese Haliburton would not be Supermax eligible until after several seasons from now, right? Is currently the 24-25 season. He would not be eligible for anything until after the 26-27 season. But let's get back to that All-NBA thing. Haliburton's not winning Defensive Player of the Year. Maybe he sneaks an MVP in the next 2 years. I highly doubt it. Regardless of that, if he gets All-NBA this year, his 5th season, that would mean that either next year or the following year, either one would make him Supermax eligible after his 7th season. Because that would mean if he gets it after his 5th and 6th seasons, the 7th season wouldn't matter. He'd be eligible after his 7th season by getting it in 2 of the past 3 years. Or if he doesn't get it in his 6th, but then does get it in his 7th at the end of his 7th season, he would have been all NBA in the most recent season. And also 2 out of 3. So in this case, this is the only season this applies to. Because if he doesn't get it this year, it doesn't matter what happens in his 6th season. If he gets into 7th, he becomes Supermax eligible. That was a big talking point with Siakam with the Raptors, right? If he had gotten All-NBA the season before this one, they could have potentially Supermaxed him. It's very interesting the way that is all structured and works out. I like that thinking. But regardless, it opens a window for Haliburton to have 2 seasons to get All-NBA once and be Supermax eligible. But it's only possible if he gets it this specific season. There's a lot more to it than this. For example, if he is Supermax eligible after his 7th season, which would be after the 26-27 season, he could sign it, but the Supermax can't kick in until after his current deal's done. So you can only sign a 3-year Supermax that starts in the year 2029, 2030, which I can't believe I'm saying out loud. But a lot of guys want to wait because in theory, if they get All-NBA the next year, they could tack it on as a 4-year Supermax instead of 3, right? There's a lot of layers that make this not a perfect argument, right? And the other thing is you become eligible for up to 35% of the cap, but it is in theory negotiable. Rudy Gobert negotiated. He goes Supermax eligible because of his Defensive Player of the Year, signed a Supermax that's less than 35%. I think he still is the only guy who did that. I might be missing one. I'm getting too into the weeds. The very specifics of this don't matter right now and really won't matter for years, right? But that is why I think it matters this year. And I know that the Pacers know this and Tyrese Haliburton's agency knows this. It's not like last year, right? Last year, if he made All-NBA, his already signed max contract would jump up in value. Now that deal is locked in, right? The current contract he's on will not go up or down based on his performance this season. I guarantee someone says something like that and is wrong on the internet by the time the season ends. That's not true. But this year specifically opens up a 2-year, if Tyrese Haliburton gets All-NBA this specific season, 24-25, then if either of the next 2 seasons he gets it again, he will be Supermax eligible after his 7th season. And only the Pacers can offer him 35% of the cap before his 10th season. If he's ever traded, that goes away until his current contract is over. And then another year after that, right? His 10th season of NBA experience would be after 2030, right? So that is why it helps the Pacers for him to get it now, because they would then have a chance to offer him more money than any team could for like a 3-year window. But he has to keep making All-NBA for that to be the case. And his first chance for that to happen would be after year 7. If he has a chance to make it, it's good for him. And if he has a chance to make his contract with the Pacers even longer, that's good for the Pacers. If you think he's not worth that much money, well, first of all, good for you for being able to see the future. But second of all, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about why it would matter to him and the Pacers for him to stay. If you don't think he's worth the money, then you don't care about this or think they should offer it. That's a different discussion. For specifically the eligibility purpose of the Supermax, this is actually a somewhat important season for Haliburton. And if he doesn't get it this year, next year just doesn't matter at all. And then the 7th season, we'll be talking about it every single year from that point on. If he ever got it again at that point, he'd be immediately eligible. But this year does open up a unique opportunity that would not be the case in other ways. Luka Doncic, for example, I think was eligible with the Mavs, even if he didn't get All-NBA this year, because he got it the previous 2 years. But he got traded. So now he's never eligible for it, which was a big talking point of the trade. Regardless, 2 in the weeds. That's why it matters. That's probably why I'll bring that up a few more times down the stretch. Get really into the candidates at some point if he keeps playing well. Last thing to get to today / this week, standings watch time. Let's go. I'm going to keep track of this in a much more organized fashion this year. Before we do that, though, we need to talk about FanDuel. March Madness is here, and FanDuel is giving you the chance to get in on the action like never before. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. It's $200 extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories, and even who is cutting down the nets. Everybody's got their eye on a few underdogs this year, and FanDuel makes it easy to pick them with spreads, with point totals, with game props, everything. With tournament games happening almost every day, there's always something exciting to bet on. And the FanDuel app is simple to use. When you win, you get paid instantly. No waiting around. So visit FanDuel.com and get in on the college hoops action all tournament long on FanDuel.com. We're back here on Locked On Pacers. Thanks for making us your first listen today and every single day. Make your second listen Locked On Bucks or Pistons, the 2 teams right around the Pacers in the standings. And boy, oh boy, are we going to bring them up a lot as standings watch continues for the rest of the season. It's a good time to start because there's about exactly a month left of the Pacers season. That's not exactly right. Last year, they ended up on April 10th. This year, their last game is April 13th. So a little over a month to go. So let me just generically start by talking about a few things before we get into specific teams. There's a chance, perhaps even a good chance, the Pacers could clinch at least a play-in spot this week. The Sixers have 41 losses. They've lost 3 in a row. The Nets have 42 losses. They've lost 7 in a row. If those teams keep losing and get to 43 or 44 losses, it is very possible the Pacers could win 3 games this week and get to 38 wins. They have the tiebreaker over the Sixers already, I believe. Not quite clinched with the Nets, but the Nets have more losses. It might be next week when we talk about standings watch, but for the purposes of this discussion, the Pacers will the Sixers are like 5 losses away from this anyway. The Pacers will be playing games beyond the regular season. That's pretty much locked up. I will go a step farther. I can't quite do it. Both chances the Pacers have had to really make it simple and easy to say this, they've blown it, right? They played the Heat last week. Could have clinched the tiebreaker over the Miami Heat. They lost. They played the Hawks twice, where a win in either one of the 2 games would have clinched them the tiebreaker over the Hawks. They lost both. So it's possible the Pacers still end up with the tiebreaker over the Heat. They lost it to the Hawks, which is relevant because it's pretty close to the Pacers having a playoff spot, for all intents and purposes, kind of secured. Here's what I mean by that. The Atlanta Hawks, who are in 7th right now after beating the Pacers twice, are 30 and 34. They are 6 games behind the Pacers. Let's pretend they have a great close to the season and finish over 500. They get to 42 and 40. That means they go 12 and 6 in their last 18 games. That would still only require the Pacers to win 8 of their last 20 to still finish ahead of the Atlanta Hawks, right? If they go 8 and 12 the rest of the way, and the Hawks surge, the Pacers still make it. And the Pacers still play the Bulls, the Sixers, the Mavs, the Nets twice, the Wizards, the Hornets, although that's their kryptonite, the Jazz, and the Wizards again. It's pretty simple to imagine the Pacers winning 8 more games. So I'm almost there for saying the Pacers are going to make the top 6. They probably need a trip and fall from one of Atlanta or Miami. In theory, maybe Orlando could surge. They just beat the Bucks, but they've been playing pretty bad of late. I think the target number for a playoff berth is probably only going to be 40 or 41. The 7, 8, and 9 seeds in the East are all under 500. So the Pacers are pretty close. I bet they're about 5 or 6 wins away. So for the intents and purposes of standings watch, I will not be talking about the Hawks, the Magic, or the Heat unless they get within 3 games of the Pacers the rest of the way. And in my head, I will assume the Pacers are going to make the playoffs and care about their seeding. So something happened this week. Besides Tyrese Haliburton getting hurt, which obviously changed the Pacers' fortunes quite a bit, Jalen Brunson got hurt in Knicks-Lakers. And he's going to miss some amount of time. I believe reporting was at least a week, probably more, with a bad ankle sprain. The Knicks felt like a very safe 3-seed bet until that happened. They are now 5-5 in their last 10 games, which is the worst of any of the top 6 in the East, including the Pacers, who are not playing well right now. They've lost 3 in a row on this road trip. They have a tough road trip schedule still continuing going on, and are only 3.5 ahead of the Bucks and 4.5 ahead of the Pacers. That is now, for a while, my assumption was, it's probably the Pacers fighting for 4, 5, 6 with the Pistons and Bucks. The Knicks are now like a thing to think about in this discussion until further notice. And they're probably going to play okay. They're really scrappy. They're still good. They have another all-star in Towns, but Brunson drives a lot of their offense. So those are the teams that I think are worth discussing when it comes to the Pacers playoff standing, is the Knicks, the Bucks, and the Pistons. And it's going to matter week to week what the situation is, because I think, and talked about this with Dave Searle, number one priority for the Pacers, home court advantage in the first round. They until the conference finals did not lose a home game in the playoffs last year. That's such a huge advantage, especially when the margins are this tight between first round teams. If you can host the first round series, that helps so much, right? Goal 2 would be avoid, I think, maybe the Pacers think the Cavs are better than the Celtics. I think the Cavs are better than the Celtics in the regular season. No doubt. They're amazing. I think I would rather play the Cavs and the Celtics in the playoffs, knowing full well that could look stupid, but everybody knows the Celtics can do it. No one's seen the Cavs do it. Like, again, I understand that might end up being wrong, but I think a lot of people will think that way. The Pacers can't catch the Celtics. Like, it's just kind of unreasonable to expect. They're 10 games better already. So 3 through 6 will be the focus of standings watch until either the Knicks start winning and get farther ahead of this Central Division trio, or the Hawks, Magic, or Heat surge in. So for the intents and purposes of what's going on, there are 4 teams we'll be talking about on standings watch this month when it comes to playoff seeding. And it's obviously the Pacers, and then the Bucks, the Pistons, and the Knicks. Lo and behold, a very interesting week is coming. The Pacers play the Bucks on Tuesday and Saturday. The Pacers are on a back-to-back for both of those games, traveling for both. That's brutal. The Bucks will have a rest advantage both times. They're already up 2-0 in the season series. Pacers have to win one, I think, to keep pace. And if they win both, they have a decent shot to catch them in theory. But that's way easier said than done. The Bucks are very good. They play the Cavs tonight, the night that I'm talking. When this episode's out, you'll know who won that game. So it's possible by the time this episode is out, these records are different. I didn't wait in the day to record this one. I probably will for the rest of these. So that is thing one to note. After those games, the Pacers are done playing the Bucks, and they're done playing the Pistons, and they're done playing the Knicks. So it's all just watching those teams' schedules the rest of the way separately. Let's go to Tankathon, who has a great feature that we will mention often. Easiest and toughest schedules the rest of the way. Here is why I think it's possible for the Pacers to still catch the Bucks, even if they only win once this week. They would lose the tiebreaker if they lose both. The Bucks have the 4th hardest schedule left in the league, and includes a game they play tonight against the Cavs. But the Bucks still play the Cavs, the Thunder, the Lakers twice, although those might have gotten easier without LeBron, the Nuggets, the Knicks, and then the Pacers twice, right? Those are medium-ish tough games. But the 4th toughest remaining schedule. Like, their middle ground opponents between the Pacers and their easy games are also challenging. In fact, they only have 2 like sucker games left. They play the Pelicans twice, the Sixers once, and then by record, their 3rd easiest opponent the rest of the way is Phoenix, right? So the Bucks have a tough schedule. The Pistons are right in the middle of the pack. 15th hardest remaining schedule. They play the Cavs, the Thunder twice, the Knicks, the Grizzlies, the Bucks twice, which is huge for the Pacers that those teams play each other, and the Timberwolves. They do have a lot of cupcake games left, though. Spurs, Raptors, Wizards twice, Pelicans twice. Pacers have the 21st hardest schedule left, in large part because they play the Cavs twice, and, of course, the Bucks twice. So, of the Central Division teams, if the Pacers regain their form or Haliburton returns from injury, they could just point to their schedule and say, that's great. The Knicks are at 17th easiest, a little bit behind the Pistons. So they have the 2nd easiest remaining schedule of that group. But without Brunson, they're going to be in trouble. So that is also noteworthy right now. I have hopefully set the scene enough for you to understand that this is going to be a fairly straightforward standings watch unless something crazy happens. The Pacers, I think, should want to be the 4 seed in a very generic environment. Host the 4-5, play the Cavs in the second round. If you think they should play the Celtics, you should want them to be the 3 seed, which is on the table now, but still extremely difficult. So those are the teams to watch. The Knicks are 40-23. They are 4.5 games ahead of the 35-27 Pacers. The Bucks are 1 game ahead at 36-26, and the Pistons are 1 game behind. They have the same number of wins as the Pacers, but 2 more losses. The Bucks games matter a ton this week, and that will dictate a lot of standings watch next week. But the scene, I think I needed to set it because there's a lot of fluff. There's a lot of teams that people are going to talk about that don't matter. And I think it's pretty clear what the focus is now after the Brunson injury for the Pacers, and the strength of schedule differences are going to be fascinating. The other smaller thing to note that I'm not going to track as directly this whole time is the inverse standing stuff. The Pacers do have their first round pick in the coming draft. So they would like to see the Warriors win lots of games. They've won 4 in a row. The Minnesota Timberwolves win lots of games. They've won 4 in a row. And the Clippers, in theory, win a lot of games. They've also won 2 in a row because those teams are all within a game and a half of the Pacers. They're in the West. And so if they have a better record than the Pacers, they don't care. And it would help the Pacers draft pick go up. Golden State's pick goes to Miami, so that double helps the Pacers. That keeps an Eastern Conference pick worse. So those are the other teams to watch a little more minorly. Golden State, the Pacers would like them to keep playing awesome. Minnesota's playing good. The Clippers are playing good. If those teams can keep rolling, that would also be good for the Pacers. The Pacers want a very tough needle to thread where those teams catch the Pacers and kind of the Bucks and Pistons, but the Pacers still finish with better seeding than them. I guess the Rockets and Grizzlies could fall into this discussion as well. They have better records than the Pacers, but they're stumbling of late. But those are the 3 West teams to keep an eye on: the Minnesota Timberwolves, Golden State Warriors, and Clippers. If you are a Pacers fan, you are rooting for those teams the rest of the way. We will update you on all of this every single week right here on the Locked On Pacers podcast. Hope you learned something today. A lot of in-the-weeds stuff that I really wanted to talk about. Looking forward to doing Standings Watch for the last month. It's one of my favorite things to do because it helps me just as much as it helps you. Tomorrow, talking Pacers Bulls. I'll be at the United Center for it. Wednesday, talking Pacers Bucks. Should be really fun. I'll be at Cambridge Fieldhouse for that. I got the days wrong. Thursday, we'll see. And then Friday, we'll have a guest joining us to talk about all sorts of stuff. I actually think we'll probably do guest Wednesday and Thursday this week. And then, hey, another back-to-back. So this will be 7 days in a row of podcasts, Philly, and then I'll be in Milwaukee for what could be the Pacers' biggest game of the season. We'll see. We'll break it all down right here on the Locked On Pacers podcast. You can find me on Blue Sky and Twitter at Tony R. East. This podcast is on Twitter at Locked On Pacers. Hope y'all had a great weekend and enjoyed this episode. Back tomorrow talking more Pacers. Till then, everybody, have a wonderful day.